market. So this is the point, I guess, or the question we're trying to pose to the group. Is Aiyuk's contract going to become an issue? And if so, would the 49ers be smart to pay him now? Or how do we feel it's going to play out? Mike.
So
I'm going to start. Let me ask Mike his thoughts on this, and then we'll go back to you, TJ.
The thing that started the debate in our chat was the OBJ signing. I don't think he's a market setter. That I'm taking that contract where he got paid. That was a one and done thing. That was done out of the Ravens being super desperate. Let's be honest. I don't think we need to prioritize it this year. We'll pick up the 5th-year option. We need to time it right when Debo's contract is ending, because we can't keep them both. We're not going to give. If we keep Aiyuk, we're not going to extend Debo a second time. That's just the business of the sport. You can't have both guys. So I think if we time it right, we can extend him right when Debo's contract is ending, and then Debo drops off, goes wherever, and Aiyuk is the highest paid receiver on the team. I think next year is when we start to worry about it and look at it. I mean, he's going to get paid. It's going to be a number, but it's not a priority this year. It seems like we go through this every year where people start picking other players that need to get paid. We still have to pay Bosa. That is the number one priority here. So
Go ahead, TJ.
I think we just extend. We take the 5th-year option and we worry about an extension next year, and then that way it'll be cheaper next year. And by the time his cap starts really kicking in, Debo will be done, and we move on.
So I think the Niners have shown the way they do business, and we're not going to get anything until his last year of his contract. But I think I have a dissenting opinion from the group in regards to Debo, or I'm sorry, in regards to Aiyuk. I don't think he's gonna break the market, and I don't think he's gonna be the market setter shy of a really huge breakout season this year or next year. I think he's and a lot of it is based on what the cap situation looks like when he's actually a free agent, but I think he's probably in that 10 to 12 million $10 to $12 million range. And I don't think he's a number one receiver yet. There's always a chance that someone's going to take a shot on him, but I put him, just looking at this list, kind of in the DJ Shark, Juju Smith-Schuster range. I think that's how teams are going to view him. I think he's definitely one of the top number 2 wide receivers. But there's also the possibility, like I said, for a breakout or a team really valuing him that doesn't really have anything at wide receiver and wanting to see if he can be that number 1. But if I had to put money on it, I would think he's going to hit the market as a number 2 guy.
Okay, as far as market setting, I'm not really on that trend with Aiyuk. It's more so like, what does he deserve? Because if we're talking about franchising him 2 years, 2026 and such, then allow me to throw a monkey wrench in there. You have Trey Lance and Brock Purdy will also be free agent in 2026. And if both of them ball out, what do you do? I mean, do you keep both? Do you pay both?
Wait. How are they both going to be free agents?
Yeah.
Brock Purdy's on his 2nd year right now.
2026. Brock Purdy was undrafted, so that means his contract length is
he was drafted.
He drafted. He was the last.
Well, seventh year. So that 7th round. So that means his contract is only like 4 years. He's on the timeline with Trey Lance.
Really?
Both will be free agent at the same time.
So it's going to be one or the other. They're not both going to ball out. It's going to be Purdy or Lance. So we're only keeping one moving forward.
Right. Is that how we feel about Brandon and Debo, though, like mutually as a group? TJ, do you think down the road it's one or the other, or do you think there is a possibility that we can keep both? It all depends on how Brandon plays, right? I mean, obviously that's
Exactly.
important.
Exactly. You know, I think it's possible we're gonna keep seeing that we're gonna keep seeing significant increases to the cap over the next couple of years because of these new TV contracts that are coming due. So I think it's possible, especially when you look at, you know, what these NFL teams have been doing with veterans to keep them under contract. They've been, you know, converting a lot of their base salary into signing bonus to make it work. So I think when there's a will, there's a way. And I mean, Kittle's been around a lot longer than we think, and so, you know, who knows where he's at in that, you know, 2 years from now, where he's at in his career. If, you know, maybe he thinks an early retirement. You know, so and I mean, Trent Williams is going to be coming off the book, so I think it's pretty fluid. I absolutely think there's a chance that they can keep both.
Mike, so who did you say you either Debo or Ayuk? If like we had to make a decision.
If they are both balling out and it comes to time, Debo wants that second contract, I think it's going to be very hard. I think the Niners will make a decision. I don't think they'll keep both unless one of them slips and say Debo starts slipping and he goes cheaper. I mean, there's always, like TJ said, a will. If there's a will, there is a way. But if they are both playing high end, top of their game, I don't see us really making a play for both. So I mean, there's it's a while. We got a couple years. There's a lot of factors. There's
Right.
other players that could break out, and we got to pay them, and so we'll see. But I don't know.
I guess so. So I guess that's why I bring that point up too, because I mean, would it be better to try to work something out now? I mean, I completely get the Bosa contract. I'm keeping the Bosa contract in mind. Brandon right now annually is probably at most, I would say 16 million tops. His projected value, if he goes over 1,000 yards next year, over 80 receptions, that's gonna skyrocket his market value.
The
The other
question
thing
Second in
that
a row.
does he want to extend now?
that's the other thing.
He might.
I'm glad you brought that up. Is how is Brandon gonna handle contract negotiations if they drag on?
He might want to bet on
When they,
himself and be like, you know what, give me that 5th-year option. I'm gonna ball out and show you, and he might want to set the market.
I don't know if the club has an option on me for the next 2 years. I don't know, me personally, I signed that extension just to get out of it.
So I got two things for you, Ron. In regards to an extension, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, for both parties, mainly the 49ers. But I think we all know that that's just not the way the Niners are going to do business.
Mhm.
So I think that kind of takes it off the table, but I do agree that it makes great business sense to try and lock them up early. And secondly, do we know, because we have a limited sample size, do we know that Brandon Aiyuk's skill set translates within other offensive systems?
That's the question
I
we
would I would
always
say yeah.
ask with our
That's a
playmakers.
great question.
When
I would say yeah.
every time we talk about our players going to another team, it's always posed like, will they succeed there, or is it just Kyle's system that makes them look better than they actually are?
I mean,
Well,
let's put it this way. Let's put it this way. Uh, let's take Christian McCaffrey for example. Perfect. He's probably the perfect example you can use. We already know who he is and what he can do. Get into the college system, he's a different beast. So Brandon Aiyuk, to me, he might digress maybe in the first year with a new team, but I think he'll ball out. He's an athlete, so I don't see him having any problem.
so is that really the question though? Is the question whether he fits in or is the question whether he'll get paid? Because Kyle gets people paid. And
Fair
the
point.
other thing is, like, if we're talking about like systematically, let's look at some players who have left who were kind of shunned. Richie James is getting ready to sign a big deal with the Chiefs.
I think he
So
did.
we have seen success with guys leaving the system and doing well. So I think, in my opinion, I do see Aiyuk going to a team getting paid, and I don't know if he's like top 5, but I do see him getting paid.
I mean, you can almost look at it the opposite way too. Is he right for our system? Because he's sitting there complaining that he's like the 4th target and he's still balling out. Like, is he actually right for what Kyle wants to do, or is it just that he's kind of getting where he needs to be and doing his thing, kind of outside of the system that's being called?
That's exactly why we
But
posed the question too. That's a great point. That's part of the reason. How is Brandon going to handle this if he's already sending subliminal messages about his role in the offense and how much production he's still
speaking of
putting out?
role in the offense, if we play this devil's advocate scenario real quick, if you eliminate Kittle, McCaffrey, and Debo, who's your number 1 target?
Well, if you get rid of every player on the team,
I'm just asking. So I mean, he's kind of, well, when you think about it, he kind of, his argument, subliminal message is kind of valid to a point. Because if you don't have those 3 guys, then you have no other option. He is your number 1.
So the way I look at it, and I think we've spoke about this before, is I think next to Christian McCaffrey, but that's a whole other deal. But I think that Aiyuk is the best wide receiver on the team. Just when you're looking at a wide receiver skill set, Debo's a weapon.
He's the most legit wide
I
receiver we
agree.
have.
no, I agree with that.
Now let's play this again. Take Aiyuk and put him with the Houston Texans. Is he number 1 or number 2?
He's
That's the kind of team that would break the bank, a team that has a wide receiver room like that.
Yeah.
Ron, you say number 2?
No, I said he's a number 1. And the thing about Aiyuk that's underrated is his availability. If you look at this list here on this screen, look how many percent of the snaps he's on the field versus everybody above him who's getting paid more than him. So I think, in my opinion, he has a valid point. Like, the rubber's going to meet the
91% of
road
the
here.
snap. Well, see, what I'm fearing is if you don't take care of Aiyuk now, or at least mid-season somewhere, and start talking to him, within the next 3 years, we're going to be running into losing massive loads of players at one time. It's not going to just be one here, one there, because we're not going to have the money to be paying all these guys, and they want to get paid. And especially if we keep making it and not getting what we want, what we're working for. Yeah, that's what I'm seeing.
I'm not worried about a mass exodus. We've got this just system that's churning it and having players ready to go, and other players aren't ready anymore. It's just,
but Mike,
under this leadership, we are not going to have that.
But
like,
Mike,
we keep bringing up this like great rebuild every year. It's not going to happen under this management.
Okay.
So I've got a question, and this may be a discussion for a future show because we probably got to look at Shanahan's history. But is wide receiver a position that Shanahan values in his system? I know he values the run blocking, but is it a position that he really values? And honestly, this may be a conversation we have next week when we can look back at, what he's run out there in the past.
Let me ask you this one question. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'll answer it by what from what I'm seeing, based off where Debo was drafted and based off where Brandon was drafted. I think he does. Those are 2 very high picks at wide receiver.
I agree. I think he's hardest on receivers.
Yep.
I think his expectations outside of how he is with quarterbacks, I think wide receivers is where he's the hardest. And if you don't do it like how he wants it, that's when you get in the so-called doghouse. But I think he values that position, and I think he really gives it to him. I mean, he's a former receiver himself.
Maybe it's just me, but to me, like a first run team, a first run offense doesn't really value their receivers like that. It's just some way, somehow the receivers just either fall into their laps or they grow within the system and become who they are.
That leads to my next follow-up. Does he value running back more than he values wide receiver when
Doesn't he
looking at
draft one
offensive
every year?
weapons?
Doesn't he draft one every
values.
year?
I think he's just building positionless football. He
Right.
values all these guys to do more than one thing. He wants everyone to block. He wants his running backs to catch. He wants his receivers to run. Like he just wants positionless football. He wants
So
guys
in other words,
well rounded and can do a little bit of everything.
he just wants athletes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which creates a fucking headache for John Lynch when it's time to pay these guys, because like, how do you even grade them? You know what I'm saying? It's like, what the hell are you? Are you even a running back, a wide receiver, a tight end? Like,
You're a 49er and we're just gonna pay you. That's what it is.
right? You know what I'm saying? So it's crazy, but that's a good point. I don't know. As far as running back, I mean, the dude can pick a guy off the street and put him in the lineup, and he'll fucking run for 150. I think.
Unless
Okay, guys.
unless his name is Trey Sermon.
Okay, guys. You got me digging here. You got me digging here
All right,
on this wide receiver thing.
bring it.
So, yes, we have talented wide receivers, but with the exception of Debo's big start last year or the year before, when he had to finish off the season at running back, like our receivers haven't put up the stats to really, like, in Shanahan's system, he hasn't had a Tyreek Hill, a Mike Evans, a Justin Jefferson. They're always just, just getting to 1,000 or just getting a little over. So what does our offense look like if we go out there and line up Curtis Samuel, DJ Shark, and Jamal Agnew? Because our wide receivers aren't putting up monster numbers in Shanahan's scheme because it's so run oriented and 10-yard slants and quick outs. I mean, does the offense look different with journeyman wide receivers? Like, Debo's kind of the X factor because he does run into the backfield, but if we're just looking at production at the wide receiver spot, I mean, is the offense going to look that much different if he just had a couple random wide receivers in there? Because they've never really highly produced. Kittle's produced some pretty big numbers at that tight end spot, but we've never had a monster year at wide receiver under Shanahan.
I guess it depends on what your definition of produced is, because in Shanahan's offense, to Mikey's point, blocking is producing. Blocking is going to get you paid.
What number wise?
You know what I'm saying? So,
Well,
I mean,
I think
for a lot
TJ
of stat-driven fans, blocking's boring, but for Shanahan, blocking is probably top priority over catching the ball if you're a receiver.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if a guy wants to block, he can learn to block, and he can learn to block effectively. And I know not every wide receiver out there wants to block. Yeah. I mean, I was a line. A guy can block. You just have to have the will to do it. And I think if you're coming to San Francisco, you're going to understand that.
You better have the will to do it, or you're not going to last long on this team.
I'll tell you what separates a blocker and a 49ers blocker is like Aiyuk. When you see CMC breaking through and breaking for a touchdown, or Debo, Who do you see blocking their ass off? The wide receivers.
True.
Brandon Aiyuk
True.
is the guy. You always see Brandon Aiyuk blocking, or Jennings, just pancaking somebody.
Yeah.
I agree with that, and as a former lineman myself, I appreciate that. That's my favorite part, is seeing the downfield blocking. I think I text about it constantly, like, look at the downfield blocking, look at the downfield blocking. But we didn't draft Samuel or Aiyuk for their blocking skills coming out of college. That was something that was taught and developed under Shanahan, and part of the reason why Aiyuk was in the doghouse early in his career. That was something learned from all the wide receivers that we have. It wasn't something that they came into the league with. It was something learned.
I think it's still a requirement, though.
It is on this team.
I think it's
Okay,
a
so
requirement.
But that's what I'm saying. You bring in a guy off the street, you know the deal in Shanahan's system. You're going to have to learn how to block.
Blocking's going to get you paid for sure.
Like, do you
Like
see
it-
CD Lamb blocking the way our receivers block?
he's too fragile.
Yeah.
All right,
But
so
that's what
before we linger on and skip on the next topic.